Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and joining me as always, get your stinking hands off him, you damn dirty listeners. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
I can't talk. Throat. My throat got shot in the throat.
Matt?
Yeah? Oh,
You're
I'm talking. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. See, this is why everyone thinks the humans are stupid. This is right here.
This is a perfect example.
This week on the show, we are beginning our new Deconstructing series, Matt, but this time we're not taking a look at a single director. We are instead taking a look at a single movie franchise. This time around, will be looking at the 10 films in the Planet of the Apes franchise, a weird, wild, and fascinating series of films that I thought it would be very fun to visit and talk about for 10 weeks. So we're doing it, Matt. I we'll see how this goes. This is a new experiment for us. We've never done it quite like this before, but I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. I think it'll be funny to say here at the beginning of this adventure that you sort of just decided that we were doing the Planet of the Apes series. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I guess we're doing the Planet of the Apes series now. And part of me was like, but why? But also I think you and I over the years have learned to just trust each other. And I was like, I know Scott has a reason for this. There must be something in these films that he wants us to talk about. And the truth was, I just hadn't really thought about them in a long time. I haven't even seen all of them. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as we watched this first one, I was like, oh, okay, there's going to be plenty to talk about. So, even after just finishing this first movie, I am totally on board with Apes, Deconstructing Apes, or whatever. I guess that's what we're calling it.
I think that's what we're calling it, yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you trusted me, and I'm glad I earned your trust, although if I'm being entirely honest with you, the primary reason was just I really wanted to watch all these movies again, and I don't have time to watch movies unless we're doing a podcast on them, so I had to invent a reason to do that. So here we are. No, I mean, honestly, I think this is a really fascinating franchise. In like, we're in this really interesting time right now where, like, I say right now, like, Hollywood has always been about franchises. It's always been about IP. It's always been about milking as much money as possible from these things. And when I look at like the biggest franchises of all time, the most long lasting franchises of all time, this one to me is one that always felt unique and a little bit different in that, it came around in the 60s. It's got 5 films from 1968 all the way through 1974. They really like churned these things out after this first movie was a big success. And then it went away for a long time, and then they tried again in the early 2000s with Tim Burton, and that didn't go anywhere. And then they tried again in the 2010s with this trilogy that's now 4 films that are really good and really interesting. And I'm just kind of inherently fascinated by like how this thing works, and maybe we can learn a little bit about like franchises in general by looking at this very weird, unique, different kind of franchise that has somehow lasted for 50 years.
Yeah. That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. I haven't seen all of these, but I've seen a smattering of them. So what was funny, I guess this is just while we're sort of table setting here, one fun thing about the Apes franchise is that it was one of the only real sci-fi popular things back in the day. Like the reason I watched Planet of the Apes when I was a kid is because I liked Star Wars, and it's like you go to the Blockbuster looking for like something else like Star Wars, you hit the bottom of the barrel pretty fast.
Yeah.
And Planet of the Apes is one of the only things that's like, well, it's in space and it's sci-fi and there's apes. They're kind of like aliens, I guess. And that's how little we had to go on back then. But that makes it a really interesting cultural touchstone too, of course, because everybody kind of knows the story of at least the first movie, although I don't really know the story of the rest of them.
Yeah. I mean, definitely this first movie is the most impactful, the most well-known. Of course, the image of Charlton Heston on the sand, beating the sand and saying, you maniacs, as the Statue of Liberty sits behind him, is like, even if you haven't seen this film, is like one of the most iconic sequences in film history. And it was a very popular film. You're right. I mean, like to table set 1968 was when this movie came out. You're absolutely right, Matt. This is pre Star Wars. And I think you said this to me um, earlier today. This movie is much closer to Star Trek than it is Star Wars.
Yeah, yeah.
And that makes sense because this is Star Trek, I think, originally premiered in 66. So this was probably one of the things that was created because of the relative popularity of Star Trek. And it shares a lot of similarities with that series. It was also like a real leader in, I know you're not going to believe this, but in special effects. The ape, the ape costume, the ape makeup, the ape mouthpiece was like at the time kind of revolutionary in how they figured out how to make that work. And I know we look at it now and it seems silly and it's very obvious they're wearing this big thing on their mouth that they have to. I can't imagine what it's like to work the puppetry of that while trying to speak at the same time. Very, very difficult. The only part that it really looked awkward for me in this movie was when they kissed. Like it's just like very clearly shoving these plastic mouth things that are over their face on it. There's a fun story about this first movie, Matt, where at the premiere, Charlton Heston's sitting there, and then a woman comes up to him and asks how he's doing, and he's like confused, and he's like, "I'm good. Like, who are you?" And it's Kim Hunter, the woman who played Zira. He had never seen her not in makeup, so he had no idea what she actually looked like. But I mean, I just think it's important to say like this was special effects wise pretty impressive what they accomplished with these masks in 68.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's one of those. They're good enough that you can suspend your disbelief and just go with it. Like there's I think one moment for me that broke me out of it slightly is like the first time you see Dr. Zaius, you can see the two sets of teeth for a fraction of a second. But like they generally, there's very few mistakes like that are just overt. And it's, I mean, it's relatively recently in our lives that everything was so perfect that you couldn't just kind of brush it aside if it wasn't absolutely, true to life. So that doesn't bother me. I think the movie has a really strong aesthetic sense of style, sense of aesthetic cohesiveness that I think papers over a lot of sins when it comes to the absolute level of the special effects.
I think that remains true for this series, at least the first 5 movies that we're going to be talking about here. This whole journey is going to be really fun because we're going to like do this very focused 5 movie series and then leap forward in time to a movie that doesn't work at all and then leap forward in time again to an entirely new series. And I think it's going to be really interesting to compare, use this franchise as a kind of way of examining what a quote unquote blockbuster film in a certain time period looked like. What were the expectations of those things? Because, I haven't seen the Tim Burton film in a long time because it's awful, but the things I remember from it as compared to what this movie is essentially at its core is very, very different. And I think it does reflect a very, very different time for the expectations of a science fiction blockbuster film like this is.
Yeah. So, one thing I was thinking while watching this movie
should we kind of just jumped into it. Should we should we say, let's talk about, let me do the thing where I get to pause so I can put the trailer in later. Matt, let's talk all about Planet of the Apes. Matt, what is this movie all about?
Well, an astronaut crew crash lands on the planet where highly intelligent non-human ape species are dominant and humans are enslaved.
Oh my God. This movie was written by Michael Wilson and Rod Sterling. It is based off the novel of the same name by a Frenchman named Pierre. How do you pronounce, French? How do you pronounce that last name?
I don't know French.
Boule? You don't say the last part, so. Boule.
I don't know. I don't speak French.
He also wrote Bridge Over the River Kwai, by the way.
Oh, cool.
So. It was directed by Franklin J. Schaffner and, of course, stars Charlton Heston and Roddy McDowall, who plays Cornelius. All right, Matt, now that we've gotten that out of the way, get into what you were talking about here.
So I guess that's a good picking up point because we just mentioned the astronauts crashing on the planet, and this felt very like of that period of sci-fi.
Yes. Yes.
Where like and I mean, it's not the golden age of sci-fi. I don't think. I don't know the name after the golden age of sci-fi. I wish I were more of a historian here, but I think it's the I got no, I
Let's
don't
call it
know.
the Silver Age.
This,
I don't
it doesn't matter, but we all
bronze.
know, we all kind of know what we mean, though. Where it's like
Yeah.
there's authors like Asimov and Bradbury are writing a lot of these types of stories. Like a lot of this kind of feels tonally like the Martian Chronicles.
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily even saying these things are influences or vice versa. It's just is this feeling of like humanity is exploring the stars, but of course that's like a metaphor for exploring our own nature. And you've got a crew of astronauts, and all the astronauts kind of suck and they're awful people. And that like this, I just remember reading versions of this book so many times when I was a kid, and I would read like
Sure.
short story collections from kind of the 60s and scattered around. So yeah, like you compared it to Star Trek. It's very much like cerebral the way Star Trek is, where we're exploring humanity in a kind of morality play fashion.
Yeah.
And there are dramatic elements. I mean, I'm not going to say the movie doesn't have dramatic elements and that it's not dramatically successful, but I think the dramatic elements are kind of subservient to the big idea of the, we're saying something about humanity and the way we
Yeah.
treat animals, and so that's all very like classic sci-fi.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. This is, I think, an establishing point that I think we'll come back to again and again throughout the series is that like this thing declares itself as being about something from right away, right?
Mhm.
Like the opening monologue by Charlton Heston, which by the way, I realized this today when I was thinking about this movie. Every time I say the name Charlton Heston, I always say the full name Charlton Heston, right?
Uh-huh.
But have you ever just like said the name Charlton?
Charles Charles
That's a weird
Charlton
name. Like it's not
Charles.
Carlton, it's Charlton.
And what's funny, I always want to put an extra N. I always know Charlton, even though there's no N in there.
Although it's spelled, unless did I copy this wrong? No, Charlton.
Charlton.
Charlton. It's a weird name, is all I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
you're just so used to Charlton Heston being like he's just
Oh my God.
this constant.
His name is not even Charlton. His name is John Charles Carter.
That's infuriating.
That is infuriating. So I'm not even gonna enjoy saying his ridiculous name anymore because he just made it up.
Anyway, Charlton Heston or John Heston is sitting in the cockpit of this spaceship. He's about to go to sleep, and he's talking about he's basically laying some exposition out for us, right? He's talking about their mission is to kind of explore the stars. He talks about the concept of time dilation, about how they're traveling at near the speed of light, so time on Earth is happening faster than time here. And I think he basically says is like, I wonder what it's like back there at home now that 600 years have gone by. Have we learned to stop killing ourselves? And that is like the declarative statement of this movie, right? Is that like mankind is this cruel, violent, bumbling species that eventually is destined to destroy ourselves. And it's really interesting because Charlton Heston's character, we meet him as compared to these other two astronauts, which you agree I think you said they all kind of suck, and I kind of agree with you. But Heston's character is like just so, not only does he kind of suck, but he's just so like he's anti everything, kind of like he's anti humanity. Like this really interesting shot where they've crash landed, they've swum ashore, and one of the astronauts stops to stick an American flag into the ground, and it's poetically like a little tiny mini American flag, right? It's this tiny one, and the camera does this rack zoom in on the American flag, and then cuts to Heston and does this super dramatic zoom in on his face as he is like cackling at the absurdity of this, like delight. It's almost like an evil laugh at the absurdity of doing that thing. And that's like he thinks humans suck too. Like like it's like we suck.
Yeah. That was an element of this film that I've never really noticed before, and I've seen this film a few times.
Hmm.
How you said villainous. I mean, he's the protagonist, but he is villainous.
Yeah.
He's very dark. He's cynical. I think he is anti-human. And the thing is, it's not because he's some amazing specimen of morality himself. He's just as bad as anybody. He's by far the most sort of cruel and callous of the crewmen. And and we see repeatedly in his behavior throughout the film that he's quick to violence, quick to
Yeah.
anger, short-tempered. Like over and over, the movie shows this. I think my favorite just example of this is like he takes to violence and he takes to like using a gun so quickly that like
Yeah.
all the other apes are just like caught totally flat-footed by how ready this guy is to just get into a gunfight. And that
Yeah.
never like registered with me before, but this viewing, it's like, oh, this is all part and parcel. This is just saying, yeah, this is a guy, the kind of animal that this guy is, human, is down to fight to the death at any moment. And no wonder these people destroyed themselves. Dr.
Yeah.
Zaius was right.
Yeah, I mean that is the fascinating conclusion of the film, right? Is that Zaius is the antagonist of the film. He, as it turns out, the reveal at the end is like knew about humans and like the like I think he says like I've been waiting for you to show up my entire life, right? He's like been feeling that eventually he's going to have to deal with this ongoing conflict, and his essential conclusion is humans are bad, mankind is bad, they're destructive, and for the good of the species, our species, simians, we need to wipe them all out. We need to kill them all. They shouldn't be alive anymore. And the conclusion of the movie is essentially, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, probably actually. Um,
Yeah.
and without spoiling things on where the series goes from here, I think that will continue. I think the one thing that it's interesting that I don't think the movie does as much as I think I remembered it doing was it doesn't turn this kind of judgment on to mankind back onto the ape society itself. I think it's there a little bit, but I really thought we were gonna the movie die, and maybe I'm just remembering later movies, but like show that their society is not in fact that much better than ours, right?
Mhm.
Like it's not this example of like mankind is inherently evil, but these evolved apes have evolved past us. The irony of this of an ape becoming more civilized than a human.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are elements of their society that feel like an archaic version of our society, where
Yeah,
there's clearly a lot of dogmatism. Like what they
there's a
call
yeah,
science is like what we would call like you know pre-enlightenment,
yeah.
quote unquote science.
It's a
Um,
theocracy,
yeah,
right? There's a clear caste system in place.
hmm hmm
Yeah, it has all the problems of a lot of early civilization,
yeah,
mankind, right?
but it's backgrounded, as you say. It's there, but I think it's backgrounded.
Hmm.
Just to ping off of that thing you just said about humanity being sort of deserving to be exterminated, at least in the context of the movie. I mean, I think there's an interesting shade we can put on this, in 2024 that wasn't necessarily apparent at earlier ages of history, which is like we now have at this point in time a lot more knowledge about prehistory than we
Hmm.
did, when this movie was made, and even for decades after this movie was made. And we know that there were contemporaneous humanoid species walking around the planet at the same time,
Yeah.
um, with what was basically Homo sapiens, and we killed all those guys. Um,
Yeah, we sure did, didn't we?
we got where we are by, I mean, let's not be totally negative about it, like probably because we're just more effective at survival, but also part of that was being more willing, ready, and able to kill our enemies as
Yeah.
a species. And so I think it's kind of wild how the movie was not predictive, but perhaps retrodictive, in terms of like what the nature of humanity is when you put us on a planet with a bunch of other apes. Um, that is what we do. We kill them. So
Yeah. Like I love the line that Heston says, I think midway through the movie or something. I think it's when they first see, it's before they've seen the actual apes, but they just see like the primitive humans like eating. Um and I think he says something to the effect of like, if this is all this planet God has, give us a year and we'll be running the place, right? It's
Uh-huh.
just such a, like, the funny thing is he's so negative on humanity, but like he's definitely part of that problem. You're absolutely right. Like it's not like he's placing himself on a pedestal above the rest of humanity. He sees all of them as inherently flawed and weak, and I mean, we get to learn that his reason for going on this mission, this no return mission, because time dilation says everyone he knows will be dead, is because he's desperately searching the universe for something or someone that's better than he feels we are.
Hmm.
And the tragic irony of this is he can't find it
Yeah.
because he doesn't actually leave ever.
Yeah. And he can't escape himself.
Hmm.
I mean, what I thought that was interesting because there's a case to be made. Like, well, maybe the apes were the better than humanity that he was looking for, but he couldn't accept that because just in the way that the apes are prejudiced against the humans because they think of them as animals, he's prejudiced against the apes because he thinks of them as animals, and he
Yeah.
isn't even open minded to the idea that maybe this was in fact the species um, who is better than humanity, or at least maybe has the capacity to be better than humanity.
Yeah. So one of the characters that really stood out to me on this view that I don't think I've ever watched this movie critically, so I've never really thought about it.
Hmm.
But it was I believe it's Zira and Cornelius's nephew, I think.
Hmm.
The young ape that helps them out in the last act of the film.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
remember what his name is now.
me
Uh,
neither.
Julius, I think maybe. That sounds right, but I don't know. Um, that character was really really interesting to me because he is making a lot of statements that I think, I don't think the movie is it's not it's laying a lot of the stuff on thick, right? And he is essentially, I think, a stand-in for like the future generation of ape society, and we're watching him as he's kind of naturally bucking against the trends of the establishment, and like the things that frustrate him is like this idea is like, is there no honor? I think he specifically speaks out against the untrustworthiness of his elders. He's talking about the need for change and growth, and how the society as they've established it now is really kind of holding back this advancement, both technologically but also just societally.
Hmm.
And he is basically a 60s hippie like
Yeah,
put into this film. But I think he is like trying to declare a lot of what the movie is saying about the ape society. Like we said, like the focus is not on the trials and tribulations and problems of simian society, but it is there. And I think this character that just kind of shows up at the tail end of the film is carrying a lot of weight towards what we're trying to do with that particular thing.
yeah, I agree. I knew what character you were going to reference as soon as you started in, because yeah, he's I think he lampshades, you could say, specifies, verbalizes a lot of what this content is. And he's all, I mean, it's funny because uh, he's one case where the movie is being funny, right? Where he's
Yeah.
probably the most overtly just like, this is a modern kid. All
Hmm.
these other characters, they kind of act, like weirdo creatures from some alien society. Let's just wave aside the fact that they speak English with an American accent. Um,
The perfect choice, aesthetic choice in the movie, by the way, is that like these big kind of goofy looking gorillas and chimpanzees, and then they open their mouth and speak, and it's just American dialogue and
uh-huh,
dialect, right? It's like there's not even any chance of like, well, how would apes talk differently? No, we're not going to do that.
uh-huh.
What would they use different words? Would they have different terms for different things? It's like, nope, none of that. Everything's going to be the same. Uh, Really kind of perfect in retrospect, because realizing that the society grew from the fall of human society, you can kind of see the why that would be. But at the time, it's just really funny when they open their mouth and it's just like, oh, it's just
Yeah.
that's just the American accent.
Yeah, no, you're right. I shouldn't be too harsh. There is an in-story explanation. It's not like these are aliens who just happen to speak English. That's
Yeah.
true. That's fair. But yeah, no, that what I was trying to get around to was like he is clearly just a 1960s kid.
Yeah.
Um, there's other elements of humor in the movie, but generally it's played fairly straight. There's an overall absurdity to the situation, but often that absurdity is sort of played for horror, actually, where it's like,
Yeah.
the scene, one of my favorite scenes has always been when he escapes from the cage and he's running and the apes are kind of surrounding and hemming him in, and they catch him with the net, and then that's the "get your paws off me, you damn dirty ape" scene. Like, it's shot in this incredibly intense and frightening way, where just like the
Yeah.
the bizarreness, the craziness of the situation, that he's this man running around being attacked by human chimpanzees, is
Yeah.
just very. I remember watching it as a child and finding it extremely intense, actually.
Yeah, it is, because like it's very easy to like put yourself in his position where he's like, especially after his two crew members are dead. Like he finds the corpse, the stuffed corpse of the one guy in the
Hmm, hmm.
museum, and then he finds the other one only to see he's been lobotomized and is just like all the other humans now, and just like the loneliness and hopelessness of this situation he's in,
Yeah,
I think really really came through for me on this rewatch. Like, I do think he's like a reckless crazy person many of the times, like the when he's just trying to get the notebook from Zira so he can write something to show he can write, and he does that. You talked about the way he's like always goes for the violent option, and he does that by just like grabbing her and pulling her against the bars of the cage and then taking it from her. It's just
right.
like, man, I completely understand why these people think he's just an animal, because he's certainly acting like one. But yeah, I mean, his desperation and hopelessness and yeah, the absurdity of this whole thing, like the I guess it's not the climactic moment, but one of the probably the second act climax is just like a courtroom case. Like, this becomes like a court procedural briefly, which is, I mean, which is so Star Trek. It is so Star Trek that this happens, that we're just gonna the big climax between him and Dr. Zayas is we're just gonna have a philosophical and intellectual debate about what it means to be an ape or a human, or like what
Yeah,
is acceptable and what isn't acceptable, and will you embrace knowledge or reject knowledge, or like how glued are you to the stories of the past versus the reality. Like, that's what the climax of the movie is, and
yeah,
that's so wild.
right. It's basically Star Trek TNG, Measure of a Man.
Yeah.
Um,
No, exactly.
and and then later, the movie does sort of end with a gunfight, but prior to the gunfight, they go to the cave, and that's kind of another long, boring, slow dialogue scene. Which, I don't actually mean that. So one thing I wanted to say is, like, the movie is actually quite, like, well written and like tight and economical.
Hmm. Yeah.
Even though it does have these long kind of dialogue scenes, the courtroom scenes and so forth, I was surprised at how just like watchable it is. Like, it's just a pleasure to watch. Um,
Yeah.
like all these different apes are actual characters. Like, Zira
Hmm.
that's a character.
Oh yeah.
That's not just like ape number 3. Like, she's consistent. She's a scientist. She's maybe a little naive and not good at accepting her place in the world. She has a very hard time actually seeing Taylor as a person, even though she thinks of herself as a good progressive ape who thinks that humans have capabilities. She kind of can't quite get there all the way. I
Hmm.
found I just love her. I love I'm just picking her out as just a prime example of she's probably my favorite like single character. But Dr. Zayas is also like a fully fleshed out character. Cornelius, every it's just a good movie. Like, that's
Hmm. Hmm.
there's a reason why it was popular and why it has staying power. Is it's not just like, this is not one of those like so bad it's good 1960s movies that we make
Yeah.
fun of. It's like, no, this is a solid movie, actually.
Yeah, it is, and it's really interesting to me because it feels like it's a movie that was at the time probably crafted to kind of slot into this very very moderately successful but like tried like B movie territory, like the science fiction B movie, you know, where it's like, you know, you think of these sci-fi B movies and it's like, okay, we're going to shoot this in the desert. We're going to drive out of LA. It's going to be for an hour, be in the middle of the desert. And we'll say that's alien planet. I mean, this is the same thing Star Trek does, right? Where it's very cheap to shoot in those locations. And so they use them all the time. And it kind of transcends that kind of B movie ideology it has,
Mhm.
I think, which I think is one of the more fascinating things about it. I mean, like it is almost kind of jarring that this in the movie with all these like heady psychological questions also has the character of Nova, which is just Charlton Heston's hot side piece that
Uh-huh.
you know, you said all these characters are characters, and that is 100% true with one very obvious
Uh-huh.
exception, which is it's the 60s. We got to throw in this hot brunette who's going to wear like a bikini thing.
Yeah.
Um, it's because she's really pretty and
Right.
serves no purpose other than like I love when I love when Taylor calls her the woman. Like
Uh-huh.
it's like no, you that's what the apes are calling her because they don't see her as a person. But you you should probably not. That's like, why are you bringing the woman? I'm bringing the woman because I want the woman.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, okay, buddy. He
Yeah.
also just like decides her name is Nova and says, "This
Uh-huh.
is what you're called now. Get used to it."
I I actually love all that. Like
Oh yeah, no, I do too. But
yeah, no, I like because it all goes in with him being this, you know, piece of garbage human where
mhm,
like I love the you know, okay, so the first moment where, you know, Zero wants to like reward him, you know, good, you know, basically good pet. And so
mhm.
she puts she puts the woman in the cave with in the cage with him and is like, here's your present. And like Charlton Heston does a great job just being like sort of disgusted at the idea of this and then kind of being like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, while I'm here, you know,
While I'm here, you know what? Well, what else am I gonna do?
win on
And
Monkey Planet. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. So exactly. Don't want to insult the customs of your.
Yeah.
And then yeah, then like you said, he that goes all the way to just like I am taking her with me. And she belongs to me now. This is my
Yeah,
woman.
there's even a specific part when
uh,
they've just freed themselves from the ape city, right? And are preparing to go on their final journey. And Nova's like pointing over there because
mhm,
that's where she's from, right?
mhm,
It's like, oh, we're near where she lives and she wants to go there. And Taylor's just like, no,
mhm.
we have to get out of here.
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't actually give a shit about what she wants.
Mhm.
Because she's not a person
I,
to him either. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting how so we're kind of making fun of that character, but this is one of the many things I was paying attention to on this viewing is like she very frequently has this expression of confused consternation
Hmm.
and anxiety on her face where it's not like they just got a hot actress and we're like just stand there
Yeah.
and be pretty. Like she's like
She's acting.
the character is acting and the character is just like I don't understand anything anybody's saying. I don't understand anything that's happening. I know that I'm in danger, but basically like the best I can do is stick with this one guy because they seem to treat him well. And I don't understand what he's saying either. And nobody ever does anything. And like a, a minor side character, obviously, but they did actually bother to have her express the sort of frustrated confusion that I think that character would feel in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, she's a very classic example. The actress is a woman named Linda Harrison, and she was a model and beauty pageant winner that was discovered by a talent scout, aka some guy
Hmm.
saw her and said, "Oh, she's hot. Let's put her
Hmm.
in some movies." And so they threw her into this movie without a lot of actual acting background. And I'm sure they basically told her, "Is like, hey, you have to just stay here and be pretty."
Hmm.
Um, and that's all you have to do. And I do appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, like, is it the best performance in the world? No, but is she doing more than just standing there looking pretty? Yes, a hundred
Hmm.
percent.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think that's great. By the way, she was featured in the 2001 Planet of the Apes film as Woman in Cart. So you know things are going well for
that's great.
her.
That's good for her. Good for her. Um, that's
But I mean, I mean, I think I think we were talking about the kind of the fact that this movie does have comedic moments in it. And you're right that the Cornelius character, I mean, it's played by Roddy McDowall, who's a very funny actor. It can be,
mhm,
and I think that the humor in this really weird too, because like I pointed out to you, like there's that one scene where they're arguing their case in front of the tribunal, and all of a sudden the tribunal of three chimpanzees is doing, or so the orangutans, my fault, is
mhm.
doing the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil thing. Each one of them is covering that different body part to represent that idea, and that's like like very cheeky kind of humor. That isn't in a lot of the rest of this movie, but is there? I don't know. What did you think of that? I thought it was really interesting how like the movie takes itself very seriously like 99% of the time, but then like that 1% of the time is like, this is kind of silly, isn't it? Let's do something silly. It's like an idea they had on set that day and just like we have to do it.
I mean, I think I like it. I think it adds to this very unique tone that this movie has. So, I mean, the contrast that I would draw would be like to the 2011 Tim Burton one that really is absolutely charmless. Like that's its biggest flaw is it's not
Mhm.
fun, you know? It's like let's take this premise, which is an inherently goofy premise when you say it out loud, and let's make it grim dark and have no fun. It's like no, you want to have a little bit of fun with it. You don't want to have so much fun that it becomes a comedy where the joke is that this is a stupid movie and the idea is stupid and we're not taking anything seriously. But you have to wink a little bit at the audience. You have to let the audience know, like, hey, it's kind of silly, right? Okay,
Sure.
we know it's silly. You know it's silly. We know you know it's silly, but hang with us for a minute. We're going to have a boring courtroom dialogue scene and then we'll go have a gunfight. It's all going to be great. We're all having fun here. I
Mhm.
actually think it was smart of them to do that, honestly.
No, I agree with that. I think it's fun. I mean, like part of the sense of humor is the fact that like the deciding piece of evidence at the end of the movie is a 2,000-year-old doll that still says mama.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that is inherently kind of goofy, right?
Yeah,
But I think it does all work together. I think you're right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, again, it's an interesting sort of writing puzzle. I think when you have a premise which is absurd,
Mhm.
and then you say, okay, we're going to take this absurd premise and we're going to tell a serious story within the absurd premise. How do you handle that? Kind of reminds me of, like there's the first example that came to mind, maybe not the best, but like Animal Farm is an
Mm.
incredibly depressing story about farm animals. And it, so again, maybe not the best example, but like the reason Animal Farm works the way it does is your defenses are sort of taken down by the absurdity and the silliness of the situation,
Mhm.
and then it uses that um lack of emotional armor to punch you in the face with like all the horrible stuff that's happening, and thereby communicates its message more effectively. So I'm not saying this is doing the same thing as Animal Farm, but it's the same sort of thing where you have to tread the line between drama and comedy and kind of take advantage of both. It's just a very weird tone, though. Like I think
It
that was
is.
one thing that sat with me a lot on this viewing. Is it's eerie and weird. Like the it ends up not overall feeling funny, but rather feeling like eerie and surreal.
Yeah.
Like the idea of there being ape people is is unsettling.
Yeah.
The movie
Well,
makes it successfully unsettling.
and one of the interesting things about how the movie ends is that like nothing's solved, right?
Mhm,
Like
mhm,
humanity is not freed from the bondage of the apes. He doesn't like lead all of the enslaved humans out into the forbidden zone with him. He just takes his hot woman. Um ape society doesn't undergo any kind of fundamental shift. In fact, the movie ends on a Zeus wins, right, and the truth is destroyed, and our two main ape characters are going to be tried for heresy, and we kind of just leave them at that. We don't really get to see the resolution of that. Um, and then the film ends on Charlton Heston discovering his worst fear, which is that not only was humanity so bad it was going to destroy itself, but you never left. You're still here. What is left for him now, right? Like, what's he going to do? Where's he going to go? And obviously, like, there are answers to those questions because there are sequels, but there wasn't planned to be sequels, right?
Mhm.
This was just supposed to be the end of the film, and it was supposed to be the end of the story. And it is not a story in which things are resolved in any kind of satisfying way. This is
Yeah.
just, so I think that that helps with the tone. Like the end credits of this film are just like fade to black as Heston stares up at the Statue of Liberty, and then just in almost silence with this eerie music playing over it, just roll credits up for a while.
Mhm.
And it's like, fuck, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
like despite the goofiness, despite the moments of horror, I think it accomplishes exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah, it's one of those like Twilight Zone episode endings where it's like,
Yeah.
the end, no moral, and again, descending from like the tradition of these science fiction or horror short stories where you're left with a sort of um, painful, stinger of some kind.
Yeah.
I really, again, seen the movie so many times, but watching it, sitting down, paying attention to it, that last shot where they're walking up to the statue and it really takes its time. I just love it. I'd forgotten how they really did this. So like you see them riding the horse from a high angle, and there's like an object. You can't quite make out what the object is in the foreground. Of course, if you've
Hmm.
seen the movie, you know that it's the torch
Yep.
of the statue, but it's all corroded, and I think if you're watching the movie for the first time, you would have no idea what that is. And then we kind of pan, and we pan across the tines of the crown of the Statue of Liberty, and you see them, and as they're going, the horse kind of keeps like starting and stopping. You can't see the actors' faces, but the horse's gait kind of communicates that he's not really actively riding the horse anymore. He's just
Yeah.
he's just staring. um and then we see his reaction. We see like close in on his reaction, and it's only after he's done his whole monologue and pounding the earth and screaming that we actually do the wide shot where we see the statue.
Yeah.
I love how all that plays out so much.
Incredible composition, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where like this is the iconic moment from this film, and this is like the out of everything that this franchise has done, this is like the most lasting cultural iconography, right? And it's like the question is, well, why is that? Is it just because it's a fun twist? Is it just because it's the Bruce Willis was dead the whole time twist of the film? And it's like, yeah, I mean, it is the twist, but you're absolutely right. The way the twist is composed, the way the scene plays out. And this is, I think, something that is true throughout the entire film. And it's why the ending works so well, is because this movie has such patience in the flow of the film. One thing, like the first 15 minutes of this movie, Matt, are just these three men wandering through the desert,
Hmm.
and like in a very 60s movie kind of move, we take the time with that. Like, it's not just like, we do this cut and play some music and yada yada it to the time where something actually happens. We spend some time with them, falling down steep cliffs, climbing up things, being exhausted, almost getting hit by boulders, stopping and seeing one little small source of life in this little tree, which, by the way, they
Uh-huh.
immediately dig
Yeah.
out of the
I,
ground.
I, I laughed out loud because they see it, they surround it. One of them says, "Life." Immediately kill it. and I didn't realize, like, that's not the kind of thing that connected to me before, but like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what we're doing with this movie. Of course that's what they
Mhm.
do. Um,
But the extreme patience in the composition of these shots with that kind of stuff, I think, is why that final moment is so iconic. Because you're absolutely right that we lay down little hints for the audience. I mean, I don't remember, of course, and I'm pretty sure by the time I had saw this movie, I like knew that it was Earth Twist already because it is
Mhm.
so iconic. And so when you see the tines of the crown of the Statue of Liberty, you and I immediately recognize that, right? But I do wonder, like, what that what the person seeing this movie for the first time would have thought of that. Would you immediately recognize that as the Statue of Liberty, or would you have had to wait? And like, you're right that the thing that I forgot is he says the whole line before we see the Statue of Liberty,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So he says the line, "Oh my God, I'm back, I'm home. All this time it was, we
Mhm.
really finally did it." Before we even see the reveal. So essentially, the reveal is in dialogue before we see the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of allowed to digest what he's saying for a few beats before we are shown why he's saying it.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know. There's just something about that. It is so freaking effective to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Again, just a lot of really a lot of iconic scenes, a lot of iconic quotable lines, and it's like
Hmm.
I don't think it's just because like, oh well, this was the first. It's like I don't know. I think they just knew what they were doing. Like
Yeah.
that whole speech, the "It's a madhouse." Like I think Charlton Heston has a talent for I don't want to say overacting because I think that's underselling it. It's like the theater of it, you know,
Yeah.
um
Hmm.
the the grandness of the performance being necessary really to like it needs to it needs to be operatic here um so that it can be memorable. You know, like it wouldn't be memorable. Damn you all to hell wouldn't be memorable if you were just like, you know, playing it like, you know, underselling it to sort of be, you know, a good 70s performance where
Hmm.
it would all be
Hmm.
muted and subtle. It's like no, no, this was perfect. Charlton Heston, Charlton Heston was the perfect guy for this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
um,
It's hard to believe that this movie would have been near as popular, and perhaps there would not have been an entire franchise if it was not for Charlton Heston, right?
mhm,
He is absolutely key to this. Um, it's yeah, he's incredible. I love Charlton Heston. He's yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right that like overacting feels like the wrong word, but maybe the nice way of saying overacting is to say scene stealing.
mhm,
Because he is just like playing it up big but in a very specific kind of way, and it's always worked for him. Like, I mean, he does it in Ben-Hur as well. Like, it's just the type of actor he was, and it works. It really
mhm.
does.
You know, I don't know much about his career really. I've seen Ben Hur, I've seen The Ten Commandments.
Hmm.
I don't know that I've seen any of his other major roles, but I thought it's interesting because in this movie he's looking kind of old, you know.
Hmm.
I don't know if I even have a point here. It's just like he's not like hot stud leading man. He's like verging into middle age, hard bitten, angry, cynical, um, like kind of rough looking protagonist. I just that stood out to me too. That was one of the many things I noticed on this viewing. Is it's like we're not supposed to think of this guy as as an attractive hunky guy
Hmm.
who we're supposed to enjoy watching. Like he's a little, and also the way Heston plays him is just like unappealing and unpleasant, right? So
Yeah, a little manic, a
yeah,
little uncomfortable. Yeah, and he's 45, I think, when this
yeah,
movie came out. So yeah, he's middle aged. And I mean, like the beard he wears through most of it. I love the line is like when he shaves it off, they're like, "You look less intelligent."
yeah,
I really
yeah,
like that. But yeah, I mean, it is such an interesting performance, an interesting casting choice, and obviously, like the later films don't repeat that, right? Like it's Mark Wahlberg cast in the 2000s version, right? It's like let's go with this young action starry type of person, and hey, it doesn't work very
yeah.
well.
Yeah, I mean, I was implicitly in my mind thinking about that contrast of
Mhm.
like you've that's what makes it a great science fiction like like a real story. Is
Yeah.
it's like this is an unlikable protagonist played by an actor who really understands that he's supposed to be playing an unlikable protagonist. And like you said, there's no big battle where he frees the humans at the end. It's a very ambiguous ending. Yeah, I don't know. Just I'm glad we rewatched this. Oh yeah, one
Hmm.
comment just autobiographically, I guess. Like I've seen this movie so many times, and yet somehow I've never seen the beginning of this movie, and I don't know why. I have no idea why that would be. It's almost like the VHS that I had didn't have the beginning or something crazy, because like I have no memory whatsoever of them being on the spaceship. Um, I only remember them like coming ashore after crashing. So that
Yeah.
whole sequence that was effectively new to me. The speech he gives,
Huh.
waking up, finding the dead woman, um, the really the cool sort of very 60s bit where the camera is rotating as the ship is coming into crash.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Never seen all that before.
That was I love that as like a hey, we don't have we don't have the money to actually crash a ship or anything,
Yeah,
or the
yeah.
technology. So yeah, we'll just make it a first person perspective, and the camera will crash into the water. Very clever, and yeah, it feels very 60s for sure. Um, this movie doesn't understand how time dilation works, Matt.
It's a speculative theory, Scott.
Well, but even within the rules of its own theory, I don't quite understand what's happening here. So the essential rule
Uh-huh.
they tell us is the ship is traveling at near light speed, and so because of time dilation, t- time on Earth is progressing at a much faster rate than time for them. So they've been on the ship for, I think they say at the beginning he's like they've been on there for 6 months, right? And like 600 years have passed or something like that. And by the end of it, the full journey of the ship was 18 months, with 2,000 years on Earth having
Uh-huh.
passed. But they get into these like hyperbolic chambers, which doesn't make any sense because it's only a year. I mean, I guess maybe it's just easier and they use less resources, but then like they're clearly not suspended because they've grown beards, right?
Yeah. So
Except
okay.
except the woman's chamber breaks and she dies, and like her corpse is like desiccated to the point where like I guess we're supposed to think thousands of years have gone by. I don't understand it.
Yes, I think there were some different drafts of this script done by different people who had different understandings. Because one thing, if you ignore certain pieces of information, then what you would think happened is they meant to go into hypersleep for like a year, but they actually were in hypersleep for like 100 years. Like that would be the basic. If you had the sound off, that
Yeah,
would be what you thought happened.
sure.
Because they aged more than they should have, but they were in hypersleep, so maybe they didn't age old enough that they died, but their aging was slowed but not ceased. And then they get up, and it's sort of like a hundred years have passed on the ship, and then untold eons have passed in um, I don't know how to say this
Earth.
word, sidereal time, or is the
What? That doesn't sound real. Did you make
it's
that up?
no, it's the word that refers to like the time that would be experienced by stars, which are not literally stationary, but relatively speaking, not moving very fast. I'm not explain. I don't actually know this well enough to explain it, but there's a word for like non-relativistic time. Eh, Let's just say non-relativistic time. There. Uh, uh, Point being that's what you would think was happening if the sound was off, but then the dialogue confuses all of this, and the
Hmm.
numbers that we are actually told confuse all of this. So
Yeah. By the way, I'm quibbling. I don't actually think this ruins the film at all. It's totally fine. And I think you said something to the effect of it's funny that they treated time dilation as like an untested theory when now we just kind of know
yeah,
it's just that's exactly what would happen.
yeah,
Maybe not
yeah.
at the exact rates that they use in the film, but
I mean, if you're going fast enough, you just got to calculate a velocity, and you could get whatever time acceleration you want. So like, I mean the funny, like, yeah, we use time dilation in, the GPS system. Like, we understand it quite well. I think even in the 60s, theory of relativity came out in like the first couple of decades of the 20th century. So we knew it was real. I think it's funny, in this modern time, we just assume that everyone has always known everything, and I think
Hmm.
that's probably not true. I think probably in the 1960s, most people didn't know about time dilation. And so if you were going to put time dilation in a movie, you kind of had to be like, here's this wacky theory, instead of
Yeah.
just being like using Einstein's theory of, special relativity, because nobody knew what that was. I don't know. Maybe
This
they
is
did.
this is so true. This is a total tangent, but I learned that we didn't figure out continental drift until the 1940s.
Hmm.
Um, which, okay, so the truth is, we like looked at South America and looked at Africa once those continents had been mapped, and people a long time ago said, "Hey, looks like those two things fit together." But then they were like, "Okay, but how does rock move?"
Uh-huh.
That doesn't make any sense. And it wasn't until we were like mapping the ocean floor in World War II, like so subs could hide from each other and discover each other, that we discovered this rip in the crust, and we're like, hey, wait a minute, that could explain it. And so like, and that was only in the 40s and the 50s, and it's like,
Hmm.
that's a thing that I just assumed when I was taught about the continental plates and how they move. Like, I just assumed that was a thing that we've known forever, but of course no, it wasn't. So
Yeah.
a tangent, but related to
No.
what you said.
I don't know. I think it is a tangent, but I think it's fascinating how even today we'll talk about stuff. Like, you'll hear certain people talk as if we had just figured out physics. Like, physics is
Mhm.
done and dusted. We don't need to. And it's like, we don't know what dark matter is or dark energy. We don't know if the universe is gonna keep expanding, or if the expansion is accelerating, or if the expansion is slowing down. They keep changing their mind about this every 6 months. There's so much we still don't know. I guess my only point here is that, no, I don't even have a point. The point is, we shouldn't be mean to people in the 1960s who needed to have relativity kind of soft serve to them.
I think that's fair. I think that's very, very fair. But they should have done it right. Damn it.
They should have done it right. They should. I mean, I think honestly, the only thing that you and I are quibbling about is the fact that they woke up like with gray hair, when it actually should have just been like, oh, we were asleep for a while.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't get the point where like he's telling the kid, the astronaut who we're basically told is in his 20s,
Uh-huh.
that you have gray hair, and it's like, okay, is that like prematurely gray hair? Like, is that like what are we
Yeah,
doing?
I think it was meant to be prematurely gray hair, like to
Yeah.
imply that they had been asleep for some ridiculous amount of time. I think we're just playing loosey goosey, and we're trying to sort of imply that a huge amount of time has passed, even though, like, the very point of all of this is that for them it hasn't.
Yeah. It's
So
weird.
it's just not. It's yeah. It's
Oh well.
fine.
I have another 60s random nonsense question.
Okay.
And this also relates to Star Trek. Why in the 60s, when they filmed fight scenes between people, they had people do the thing where they put both of their fists together and then like bring it down on of the back of the guy they're fighting? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kirk does this all the time in Star Trek, and Hesta did it in this movie too. I'm like, do people fight that way for real? Why are we doing this?
I don't know. I honestly, it was funny. I guess I didn't really notice it, but I always noticed it in Star Trek. But I thought in Star Trek that it was like, oh, this is the future, and they have a future fighting style that they're taught by Federation Academy. But you're right, he
No,
does do that here. I
Heston
have
does
no
it. Yeah.
idea. No idea. I mean, this is a complete guess that I have literally made up right here. But I'm wondering if maybe it's like there are certain things that they weren't allowed to show based on, like, the rating system or whatever. So
Hmm. Hmm.
so they started making up martial arts moves.
I
But
mean, it
I
might
don't know.
also be easier to film with stunt
Mhm.
doubles and stuff, where like you don't have to worry about cutting on punches or anything. Like, it's easy for someone to throw their like their double hands on someone's back without actually hitting them hard, but making it look like it's hitting hard. I don't know. It's probably
Yeah,
something.
I'm sure you've done. You probably took like drama in high school, right? We had to learn the ways that you do stage violence, which are totally different from the ways that you would actually fight. So maybe it
Yeah.
has to do with that, like stuff that just looks better on camera. That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking about like how having to do things differently because of the way sensors and stuff work, the best piece of trivia I found about this was that when when he says "God damn you" at the end of the movie,
Uh-huh.
the censors wanted to edit that for profanity,
Uh-huh.
but Heston was able to convince them that he wasn't saying a profanity. He was literally asking God to damn them
Yeah.
because they destroyed the world. Right? So he's not using the Lord's name in vain. He's just saying, God, damn them.
Yeah.
Which is so stupid.
Right.
It's so stupid. I'm so glad we don't live in 1968 anymore.
That's very funny. I mean, well, I don't actually think he's wrong though. Like the character in that moment is he's not just swearing for swearing's sake. He's condemning humankind, right? It's an emotionally meaningful moment. But I do think, the funny part is that he had to make this case, right? Yeah,
so stupid.
Very funny.
So I think we could wrap this up with talking about The Simpsons real quick, because I think so. Question for you: when you saw the episode of The Simpsons that features the Planet of the Apes musical, had you seen this movie already?
I think so. I think I watched these movies when I was like age 7 or 8, which the reason being that we were living overseas and there were only so many VHSs you could get your hands on. So this is why I've probably seen this movie an unusual number of times, and why I'm really weirded out by not having seen the first few minutes. I literally think that maybe this was some Indonesian bootleg that I had,
probably.
that was just missing the first 10 minutes of the movie. It would not surprise me at all. Actually, now that I've thought of that, that's almost certainly what happened. Yeah. Anyway, that was a sidetrack. I had not seen the Simpsons. I saw this movie before I saw the Simpsons episode. Yes.
Okay. I'm pretty sure I saw it the other way around.
Okay.
I don't remember when I first watched these, but the Simpsons episode featuring the Planet of the Apes musical was a season 7 episode, which means, hold on, let me look this up. It came out in 1996. So I was 11. So yeah, I'm pretty sure, because I saw these movies originally. I talked about this last week, but we got a DVD player, and my dad bought my mom the box set of the original 5 films, and we watched them all. Pretty sure we didn't have a DVD player in 96. So definitely thinking I watched this episode of The Simpsons first, which it means that I've always connected this movie with that episode, just always, because I saw the episode first and then the thing they were parodying afterwards. I rewatched the episode today, Matt, and it's really good. Let's just reminder for everyone: The Simpsons, it's pretty fucking good.
Yeah, and that was like the heyday. That was smack in the middle of, I think, the run of the best parts of The Simpsons.
I realized when I was going through the episodes to find this one, that was the season that starts with the "Who Shot Mr. Burns" reveal. It was the Bart sells his soul season. This was the bangers, and this is a really good episode of TV. It's the one where Selma gets in a relationship with Troy McClure. He's just using her to bring his career back because he fucks fish.
Yeah.
This is literally, there's several jokes about the fact that he has this weird sexual deviant thing at the aquarium. And the reason he's dating Selma is because if people see him dating a human and not a fish, they'll be willing to see his movies again. The Simpsons, man. It's so funny. Troy McClure's just a fish fucker. He's deep from The Boys, but 20 years early.
Yeah. No, I mean, what's funny is I'm pretty sure at a certain age I got that joke, and there's a lot of little references to it throughout the episode, but there's a certain age below which those jokes will all go over your head, and I think it's kind of amazing that they managed to thread that needle.
it is also the type of thing where I forgot that the Planet of the Apes musical portion of this episode is like 3 minutes long. It's
Mhm,
like two songs. It's Rock Me Amadeus rewritten to Dr. Zaius, and then it's the finale song of You'll Never Make an Ape Out of Me.
mhm,
And this 3 minutes of television is seared into my brain for all eternity. Like
mhm.
literally at any moment in any day for the my entire life, I will just start singing I hate every ape I see from chimpanzee to chimpanzee. Like
Uh-huh.
it is fascinating how much this thing like it's just I know this is not an episode about the Simpsons, but it's incredible how good this was and how just
Uh-huh.
it becomes this thing that takes over your entire brain.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. I always forget, 3 minutes out of like a 27-minute episode. No,
Yeah,
probably less than that, right? Like
probably a little less. Yeah.
it's a big chunk of the episode, but yeah,
It is, but
it's
also it
amazing.
isn't. Like it's not the like if you had asked me 2 days ago what this episode is about, I would have said it's the episode about Troy McClure making a Planet of the Apes musical.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, no, that's not that's not what the
Right.
episode's about actually. It's just a 3-minute gag in the middle of the episode.
Yeah. I mean, it's really about Selma, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Just great. It's hilarious. I have that song on on the
Mhm.
CD that I've listened to 10 million times. So oh yeah,
My poor.
you pointed out to me something. Despite having listened to that CD and this song a million times, never noticed that the person voicing his agent on the phone, who says uh, uh, the brand new musical starring you as the human, is Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
You pointed this out to me today.
Why? Why is just Jeff Goldblum randomly on this episode as a bit character that has like 3 lines? I don't know, but that was The Simpsons in the 90s.
Yeah, I am. I have no information for you here.
Oh my gosh. So if you haven't seen the Simpsons episode, go watch it, and then you'll be like me, and you'll randomly just be sitting in the kitchen making dinner, and start singing, and your
Uh-huh.
wife will be like, I married you." I'm like, I know, good choice.
Uh, uh,
Yeah. All right. So that is Planet of the Apes. Matt, next week we'll be diving into the sequel of this movie, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. This is a franchise, Matt, that used non-numbered sequels before it was cool to use non-numbered sequels. Um, which is great, but also like really confusing, actually.
uh-huh. Yeah, I certainly don't remember which movie is which and what the order is. So
I honestly had to look it up before I wrote it down for the script because and I I think the next one is Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and then there's Battle for the Planet. I don't know, and then the freaking new series did the same thing where pay me $100 right now to tell you which of the new 4 movies is the first one. I
uh-huh.
don't know. Is it
Yeah,
Rise?
right.
Maybe.
Well, that's the funny thing is they have Rise and then Dawn, which
Which is the first one?
both of these mean the beginning. It's very stupid.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. But that is a uh so here's the one thing I'll say without spoiling anything for you or any of our listeners who maybe haven't watched these sequels to this film yet. Shit gets weird. Like think about how weird you think it's going to get. You will be underestimating it. I can pretty much guarantee that.
Awesome. Can't wait.
All right, couple things to do before we go, Matt. The first is we have to talk about last week's episode about Lord of the Rings. We put that one up for a vote for our patrons and our listeners to see if it would be entered into the canon. And Matt, what do you guess? What do you guess the result of that poll is?
I would guess that it passed by a narrow margin.
Yeah, a narrow 100% margin.
Okay. Okay.
I did not expect this to go any other way. The one thing I will say, Matt, is I appreciate what our listeners did, and I hope they continue this through all movies in the future, is we got a lot of comments from people on why they like this movie. Not just why they like this movie, just like this kind of stuff we talked about, but their history with this movie and why this movie is important to them. And it's really cool to see. This is, I think when we originally had the idea, the concept of the canon, I think the thing that we wanted to do was put movies in there that wouldn't show up on other lists. I think this is a movie that is going to show up on a lot of other lists of the greatest films of all time. But I think it's okay because this is an incredibly important movie to a lot of people too.
Mhm.
And getting to see people's reactions to it and getting to listen and read their stories about where they were the first time they saw it, what it meant to them, what it did for them, how it changed them. I thought that was just really cool and is a testament to how freaking good this movie was.
Right. Yeah, it's a great movie that's beloved by all, but it's in particular beloved by you and me, and thus
Mhm.
valid
Yeah.
for us to talk about it.
I agree. And I did, with my copious amounts of free time, I did go ahead and watch The Two Towers and Return of the King after we recorded that episode last week.
That's great.
I don't know how I fit that in, but I did. And good movies. Good movies. I think the one thing it did do, as much as I loved them and I think there are good movies, it did cement for me the idea that this is Fellowship of the Ring is the best of the trilogy. From a pure, like, just like, I want to say objective, but not objective, but just like, I think it is the most complete, perfect film of the three.
Yeah, right. I think
Not that the other two are bad, right?
yeah, I think what we said last time it holds here, where it's like the other two, their only real problem is they have stuff in them that doesn't quite feel right to me.
Yeah.
And it would have been, and I'm just like, yeah, there's nothing in Fellowship that doesn't feel like it belongs there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. All right, one more thing, Matt. One more thing. It was Comic-Con over the weekend, and Marvel was back at Comic-Con. They had a good weekend, Matt. Marvel had a pretty good weekend. Deadpool and Wolverine premiered to $200 million domestic, what the biggest rated R movie opening in the history of the world. It made a lot of money. It seemed like it was a hit. Not a huge amount of critical response for the film. I haven't seen it. I don't think you've seen it either, so we can't really comment on the quality of the film. But it certainly made a lot of money. And at the same time, Marvel was laying out their plans for the future. One of the things that they did is, the original bad boy of this whole phase of the MCU was supposed to be Kang, right?
Mm-hmm.
Played by I don't even remember, Jonathan Majors, yeah, who beats women, and so he doesn't get to do that anymore. So they just kind of wrote that character out, and what they're doing now is they're doing a Doctor Doom thing. And the surprise reveal on stage was, I don't know if you watched the video, by the way, or if you just read the news, but a single man walks out on stage in the full Doctor Doom getup. He rips the mask off, and it's Robert Downey Jr. He's back.
Uh-huh. I haven't been able to work myself up to watching that actual video yet because I don't know if I can stomach it. I say all of this bearing in mind that 5 years from now, we could be having a conversation that's like, I am so thankful that he came back and took on really the best character in the history of the MCU, nay, film history. Doctor Doom. His role as Iron Man is a footnote to his contributions, et cetera, et cetera. Am I saying I think that'll happen? No. I'm saying I like to be open-minded, actually. But at this exact moment, I'm not feeling super open-minded. I think this is Marvel being desperate and pushing the emergency money button.
Yeah, I can't help but see it that way either. I mean, like the first thing they announced was that the Russo brothers, who directed the last two Avengers movies to great success, at least financially, are back to direct the next two Avengers movies as well. And my reaction to that was like, oh, really? So we're just like, they went off on their own. They tried to make some movies on their own. None of those movies were particularly good. It is this kind of idea of like everyone left and went to do their own thing. And like all those things weren't turning out pretty good, except for, ironically, Robert Downey Jr., who went on to win an Academy Award.
Yeah.
And like, and I, like, I don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic about this thing. Like, obviously, they threw a lot of money at him, and that's why he did this. But also, like, he went out, he made a Christopher Nolan movie, he won an Academy Award. He is like deeply appreciative of the role of Iron Man and like what the role did for his career and for him. And so, like, I agree he's going to make a lot of money off of this, but I also can see a world in which they just said, "Hey, we need your help," and like he loves those movies and he loves his time there, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll do it again, sure." Um, the cynical side of me is just like, we're never gonna get past this stuff, are we? Like, we're just never gonna get past it. Like, I'm telling you, Matt, within 3 years, Chris Evans will be back in these movies. Like, there's no doubt in my mind he'll be back. Now, will he be Captain America? Because Sam Wilson is currently Captain America. Yeah, we'll see. But he's going to be back. He's going to be back as Steve Rogers, at least. And we're just going to keep doing this. We're just going to keep doing this. You know, they tried. They couldn't make good movies without these guys. And now we're back.
Chris Evans as Iron Man.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
The response to this was very exciting from a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I mean, I think they showed Fantastic Four footage and I haven't seen it, but the response was positive. I think it's interesting. They're doing a Fantastic Four thing. Sure. Whatever. I can't get excited about this anymore. And maybe that is more about me than it is about this franchise. But like, my reaction to this whole thing was, this sucks. This really sucks.
Yeah, I think they wisely took a breather, circled the wagons. I don't know. I think they know they made that they know they messed up. There are some smart minds behind this. I think the smart minds, they felt like they landed the plane and they stepped away from the cockpit, and some other people went into the cockpit and mistakes were made, and now Disney, etc., have said, let's get this thing back under control. Whether that means that it will get better again, who knows? We could be in for another golden age. We could be in for more of what we've been seeing over the last couple of years. I don't know. At this point, I don't like to prognosticate about these kinds of things because, first of all, I want things to be good. I want to like them. I'm open to the idea of liking them. You watch a lot of YouTube videos where you feel like the person making the video has just decided to hate all of this stuff in perpetuity. And that's not me. I want to like it.
Yeah.
And so maybe it'll be great. Maybe again, I like Robert Downey Jr. I think it's very weird that we're going back to Robert Downey Jr. specifically because I know why you did that, because of Iron Man. But setting that aside, he's a great actor. Maybe he'll have something really interesting for us with Doctor Doom.
It's very possible. I can't help but look at it and be like, this kind of kills the beauty of the finale of Endgame for me. Like, I mean, part of why Endgame mattered was extra textual to the film itself, and just as this kind of culmination of their 10-year project. This is the end of this particular story, and it's also the goodbye, right? Like the reason why the Iron Man death scene was so emotional is because we were not only saying goodbye to Iron Man, we were saying goodbye to Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. We were saying goodbye to Robert Downey Jr.'s time in this movie franchise. And now, a few years later, we're just going to undo that. And if we do it with Steve Rogers too, it's like the end of Chris Evans' time in this franchise was like, will you tell me a little bit about your past? Or what happened? And he's just like, no, I don't think I will. And that's the last we see of Steve Rogers. And it's like, that's perfect. Let him go. Let him just give him the happy ending. And we're not like, we can't. and it breaks my heart a little bit that
Uh-huh.
like we just can't let this stuff go. We can't let these characters go. We can't move on from the established past, from our nostalgia, from like we're never going to move beyond it. This is the same problem with Star Wars. We're just stuck in this horrible cycle. Nothing's ever going to change. We're just going to keep doing this over and 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 over again. And I just
Yeah. I mean, I guess so. Couple of things there. One thing that occurred to me as you were talking is just
ranting.
like ranting. It's just like Doctor Doom, like canonically, you basically never see his face.
Yeah.
So why does it even particularly matter?
Because obviously they're not going to do that with this version of Doctor Doom.
Yeah, I
right?
guess you're right. But yeah, okay.
They're going to make him a Tony Stark variant or something from one of the other alternate universes, and he's going to wear the mask for part of it, and then he's going to take off the mask. Like, it's going to be stupid because it's going to be a reveal that it's Tony Stark within the film, but that's not the way the internet works and society works anymore. Like, everyone watching this movie is going to know because they're going to push that heavily in the marketing. But I mean, that doesn't mean it won't work. Like, it'll still be a reveal for the characters. Obviously, like, you know, you can just close your eyes and see that Peter Parker sees that the guy they're fighting is Tony Stark, and like what that'll do to that. Like, yeah, that scene writes itself, but I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe you're absolutely right. I need to get out of my own way and just be like, hey, maybe this will be good. Like, they're going to do X-Men in this universe now, and maybe it'll be good.
Yeah, I just want them to make me feel something. I don't.
Sure.
You know.
Yep.
So.
All right. So we got to see Logan or Wolverine and Deadpool. We got to see that eventually. Yeah. I don't know when I'm going to see that, but we've got to see it.
I don't either. No idea when I'm going to see it, but I do want to see it.
I've enjoyed the previous 2 Deadpool movies, so I have high hopes.
Yeah, me too. I've heard good things about it. I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm literally at the point of just trying to find a slot in my schedule where it will work, and not finding anything, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna just take my 3-year-old. That'll be fine, right?
I think it's a comic book movie it's for kids. Yeah,
it's for children's. Yeah. All right, folks, that is all we have for you guys this week. If you have any opinions on Planet of the Apes, on this ongoing series we're doing, or on Robert Downey Jr. and his return to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on Twitter @doofmedia, or at our subreddit r/doofmedia.
Yeah, and if you're not subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to subscribe and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, please consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. Head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge at any of the available levels. We have bonus podcasts that come out every month. I think, Matt, we're going to be doing another episode of Castle Talk here pretty soon. So if you like to listen to us talk about television shows like Castle Rock, you can find that there, as well as a huge backlog of other things, and of course the ability to vote for the stuff we do for canon. So yeah, go check it out.
Also, it would really help us out if you would consider giving us a rating and review over on Apple Podcasts. Each review really does help us out, gets us more exposure, and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
All right, folks, so that's it for us this week. Next week, we head beneath the planet of the apes. What's there? It's weird shit. Some really weird. Matt, I'm so excited.
All right, me too.
We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.